Everybody, thank you for tuning in. This is Ian here along with Chris. We are bringing you guys our cut, our review of Alita Battle Angel. Alita by James Cameron. This one just hit in theaters this weekend. You know, we were talking about doing an earlier showing for this. We ended up doing this going into the weekend instead. This is
because it's 10 hours long.
Yeah, basically, if you guys are going to go check this out, hey, get your popcorn or whatever else, because you will be in. I believe it's a little over 2 hours. 2 hours 20?
2 hours 20, and I have to amend, directed by Robert Rodriguez, screenplay, and I think produced by James Cameron.
Good amend. Hey, look, if you guys are coming over here from our short review, again, it's no secret that there's, at least on my end, I've been so excited and concerned about this too. The stigma of adaptations, especially anime going into live action and things like that. Oh gosh,
yeah, not the best.
Not the best at all. Was really afraid, really afraid. But I trusted the source material for this because it's so strong. You know, for this series, I'm just going to say up front, I'm a longtime fan. Biases aside, I don't think that there's something else I've seen or read, anime/manga wise, next to this when it comes to sci-fi, cyberpunk, and whatnot, except Ghost in the Shell. That's about one of the few things I can think of in the same realm.
Which was not good.
No, the live action version was
not good. So yeah, we have two very different perspectives here. As Ian said, he's a big fan of the source material. I mean, I delve in the geekdom in many different categories, enough to the point where I've heard of Alita. I've not seen much. I'm coming into it with a fresh head.
Right.
So two very different perspectives on this, as far as that goes. Big fan, and me just a fan of sci-fi and robots and and killing things and
things that you have in this movie. All the above.
That's right. That's right.
As a preface, of course, you guys you already know this if you're here, but there will be spoilers mentioned here in this review. So if you guys are still waiting, if you just don't want to hear anything, if you just want to see how close the fidelity is yourself, you have been warned.
Yep.
So
check out our short review.
Yeah.
That'll give you a good jumping off point. Come listen to this after you've seen the movie.
There you have it. So, besides the long runtime here and everything else we've had on the board for it, you know, and early impressions and stuff like this, hey, I gotta say, look, this is just me, dude. From opening scene, I'm instantly pulled in because we get that huge view of Zalem/Typhares, however you want to refer to it. I think for the sake of this review, I'll stick to Zalem saying that, just so I don't confuse things with the movie.
Yeah, you'll confuse me in 5 minutes. Start going off of other stuff.
Yeah, I'll stick to Zalem. You're immediately pulled into this really this huge fleshed out world where you've got this really the meaning of dystopian here. You've got this terrible just junkyard, literally called the scrap yard, below this massive floating. It was supposed to be a utopia called Zalem, and this starts exactly where the manga starts. I mean, this is almost shot for shot. Alita is discovered in a scrapyard by Dr. Ito, and then given a body, a brand new body shortly prior out of that. And where things go from there, if you've read it, you sort of know where things unfold. If not, you're quickly brought along on the roller coaster ride. I think this is one that takes more pains to, keep people involved with the action rather than just doing slow plotting narrative and stuff like that. It's immediately established, immediately set up that there's something more to her. There's something more to Alita than just being another cyborg in the scrap pile, and sure enough, it is. Not
that that's not enough.
Right.
Being a cyborg is pretty interesting in and of itself.
It is. And I think the thing I love here is how that's established right up front, how easily accessible and how disposable all this stuff is. You know, you think of cyborgs and stuff right now, and this sounds like something, you know, so far off to attain. And then here you have this in this world where it's like, well, almost every other person and their mother has some kind of cyborg upgrade or something.
Yeah, you know, why is that? That's one of the things I wonder is, like, okay, I understand we're in a dystopian future here, but I mean, there's a lot of limbs missing.
Yeah, there are. One thing I'm going to talk about a bit. I am going to weave a little bit of the stuff that I know about the series into this as we talk, maybe just to shed some light on those few things. One reason I see this a lot is, okay, if you've seen the way vultures behave out in the wild, it's kind of like that here. If you lay down in the street too long, if you're incapacitated, whatever it is, you're taking a nap, not a good thing to do. There are basically these traveling little caravans of doctors that just come along, and if anyone is viewed as like, it's kind of like, I guess you can view it as like public insurance. If you're there long enough, they just take you and just start operating on you. They call it street surgery. And the doctor alludes to this at some point in the movie anyway, but they don't really go into it. But they will literally give you cyborg upgrades and like give you a completely different body, and you'll wake up in this different form, and then they'll charge you for it, and you'll pay the debt the rest of your life. So,
really?
Yeah.
I didn't really catch on to that.
Right. He hinted. He took a small hint about how expensive that can get, or those that are just around. He makes a really short comment about it, I think in like the first fourth in the movie about it, but I instantly smiled because I thought to a scene from Last Order of just this homeless guy who's just passed out, and a few panels of silence go by, and these doctors just grab the guy up and then just give him this crazy body and then just put him in debt. It's crazy. So
I missed that completely. Yeah. Wow.
But
okay, all right. Sure.
But yeah, you're like, sure, yeah, go for it.
Well, so I guess overall, let's talk a little bit about this world that they put us in. It's the 26th century.
Right.
It's after, they don't call it World War III. It may not have been World War III, but it's 300 years or so after what's called the Fall, which is an important part of the film.
Definitely.
You have, what's the name of the city that's up in the air?
Salem.
It's the last of a bunch of giant cities that used to exist. There was a war that happened a few hundred years ago, and it's very dystopian. They do a good job of creating in giving this world life. I'll give it that. Although I wish in the first quarter, or not even first quarter, but the first third of the movie. First act of the movie, they would have spent a little bit more time. Just slow down a little bit and let me take this in, because I missed the homeless guy getting a body upgrade.
Right.
I didn't see that.
I do want. Oh no, you didn't. And again, I want to make sure I'm completely clear in this. That's the kind of thing that happens in this place, and like that can happen, in the scrapyard and tie fairs and places like that. It's just like a part of like this world in general. So no, you did not completely miss a scene, but I'm just kind of placing like how crazy this whole thing about cyborg upgrades and stuff like that is. So you're good.
Okay, well, so I guess I mean I didn't quite get that feel from it, but I overall I enjoyed the world that they created here. It's definitely a fun environment to be watching. Maybe not so much fun to actually live in, but it's they do a really good job of fleshing it out. And did they do a good job of matching what you would have expected being a fan of the manga?
I'd say they definitely did. And the reason why I was pulled into this so quickly is the first few pages of the original Alita manga were in color, and we're brought into this this sort of dusk scene, or sunset rather, where Ito's out in the scrapyard piling through and he finds Alita. I mean, literally, that is shot for shot. I mean, and even furthermore, as you go on to read this in black and white, I mean, a lot of this is how I sort of filled this in my mind, my own mind, from his clinic to everything else. So instantly I feel that we're there, which is, I think, something you really have to bring to the table convincingly. That can be hard to do with a movie like this, especially with its kind of roots. So, and of course, with that, naturally, I know there was this was filmed in Latin America. There were a ton of 3D printers used for the various materials and a lot of like the prop setups and things like that. Even though the use of CG I thought was really solid, I think, to help bring all of this together. This film's got no qualms with what it is, with what it's trying to be, and I think it stays there unapologetically. This happened, I think, beforehand with the design decision. Everybody was assaulting Alita's eyes, saying, "Oh my God, that looks crazy. How can you go through with a movie like this?" To the way it stays, I think it's in that zone, and it goes to deliver on that full hog. So, the translation to this, though, about just the world, I think you can't have, I think, this world without its characters. One thing the lead has always done as a series is focus so much on her and what she brings to the story, and for good reason. She's got a lot more to do with a lot of the surrounding events than people would think at first, and especially the role that she played in, and from the things that were forced on her, she had to do from the things that she actively chose to. And I think, along with the world, I think the main characters themselves are brought into some really, really good light here. I loved Miss Salazar's performance as Alita. I thought she rocked it. Everybody else came across convincingly. And then there's other characters that you have to make even more of a case for. Jennifer Connelly's character. I thought that with Shirin. Now this was interesting because she wasn't even in the original manga. This was only a character that shows up in the anime. So to bring her and her relationships to everybody else in, I think was something challenging to do. I don't think she got quite as much time as the others, especially the amount of time we got with Alita, which we should, of course, with Hugo, etc. But I think all of them are put alongside this world, casted pretty well.
I would concur. I thought that the acting overall was done really well, especially given that a movie such as this, often you will find that people are just... It's hard to act in a world like this. It's hard to be an actor, and so much of what you're reacting to and so much of what's going on around you isn't even really there.
Right.
I mean, acting against a green screen or against a prop that's going to be replaced later on is almost old hat at this point. They've been doing this for about 15 years or so now on a regular basis for movies. But there's so much post-production here that can be a little rough. No, they do a really good job. The actress, what'd you say your name was, who plays Alita?
That's Miss Salazar, Rosa Salazar, by the way.
Anyways, she does a really good job, but I was a bit taken aback when I was actually looking up the cast for the film to find just how little she actually looks like Alita.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I will give that as a testament to the CGI department for doing such a good job of making such a convincing character. I had assumed that that I was going to find somebody who looked very similar to her. No. Not the case. So I guess what I bring to the table as a question for you then, Ian, is did they nail the look for Alita?
This is something that I really feared going into. They did some fine tuning, I think, before the release from the first shots we ever saw of this to now. I'd say yes, they did. I think a huge worry here was bringing over expressiveness. It's ridiculous to have one character with the genuine anime style theme when everyone else looks, cyborg, normal sized eyes and stuff like that. But part of it, you can get away with this easy in anime and manga because naturally how characters are drawn reflects personality traits. Usually something off the bat, if you have characters with really angular looks to them, really kind of thin eyes and stuff like that. That can be one of the more cruel, calculating villains. And then characters with the big eyes, usually younger characters or really, imaginative characters, stuff like that. The same thing doesn't fly here. But in the same hand, it works, I think in a different way. And not for the reasons I thought it would/wouldn't. I think it actually fits and actually blends with the world, not just with how expressive a character she actually is, but in the mangas and stuff as well, how much of a focus there's put on how much she's actually been through and how much turmoil she's dealt with and stuff like that. But I think to accurately get a read on the tension of each scene, from her, I think we feel a lot of the events that happen through Alita, through how she's processing. She starts off as someone with, complete amnesia about who she is, how she got here, to how she's processing all of this and what kind of decision she's going to make on it. So shockingly, this didn't bother me. This didn't bug me the whole film. I thought I was going to go crazy watching this and saying, "Oh my god, this is just terrible." But it fit. I thought it worked.
All right. Yeah. Well, because like I said, I was expecting to find an actress that looked very similar to her, and I didn't.
Right.
So it was a very conscious and intentional decision to make her look the way that she did.
Right.
Yeah, no, I again coming in without any expectations. I thought it all worked really well. Let's see, I did not buy, what's his name, Ido?
Uh-huh.
Ito? I did not buy him as a hunter warrior.
Yeah.
And I will, in now having looked at some of what that character is outside of the movie, I think they probably could have casted him a little bit better. That being said, I thought he acted it just fine.
Sure.
Especially for what they had this character be in the film. Which, and again, I don't know much about the source material, but as the kind of caring father type figure that he was, it worked out that way. But then as a hunter warrior, I was like, what?
Yeah, he had more. We were talking about this a little bit beforehand. He definitely had more time for exposition in the original material about that. He had a couple of outings. Alita noticed something was off about how he was bringing parts and stuff in, and she initially thought, well, okay, he's just straight up just murdering people to just go get parts. What's he doing? And she finds out the actual truth. But he delves into that more in the original stuff. I thought it came across a little better there too, because you had this contrast to this gentle doctor figure, and then someone who went out and did these like pretty crazy, fierce, like violent things, by night. I think it worked better in that context. It's just we sort of have that thrusted at us here, and it's just all right. This is the thing. Boom, got to go accept it. All right, roll with it.
And that happens a lot too. And actually, quite honestly, they do a really good job of that for the most part. And I think if you go again, coming into this without any bias, I did come into this expecting. I knew it was a comic, and yes, I know it was a manga. It's a comic, and I know there was a lot of source material. So I did come in knowing they're probably going to have to scrunch a lot of this together, and they're probably going to have to skip some plot points, and they're going to have to take out B, C, and D and go straight to A,
exactly
to F. So. I was anticipating that. They do a pretty good job overall. I would say that near the end, the roll, is that what it is? Rollerball?
Yep, you got
or
it.
battle ball or
rollerball. You nailed it.
Robot wars. Yeah, and you had told me as much, and I didn't even bring it up, but you'd mentioned this. Yeah, at the end when they skip and like all of a sudden she's just the champion or getting to be the champion.
Right.
It's like, oh, you skipped a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
I know you did.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, for overall scope of what this covers, which I was really curious. I know going into this, I said, James Cameron, I can see this turning into a trilogy or something easy, just because there's so much to work with. This film covers roughly the first 2 volumes of the manga or so, which is about 160, 200 pages or so. So you've got that mixed in with a little bit of the latter stuff that happens as well as for the last portion of the film with the rollerball and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. You do have a really quick lapse with some of those events as compared to some of the rest of the stuff earlier. And I think that's just a real challenge here that this film had coming in, and I think that's going to continue to have for the obvious grab at a sequel. There is just such a ridiculous breadth of stuff to work with that I don't think that there's a feasible way to get into the second series to this, which is called Last Order. I don't see them even doing that. If anything, I think this will cover the original and leave it at that.
Well,
we'll see.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. As you say, it's interesting that you say that because I don't give them any slack for that at all. I mean, look, you decide to tackle something like this.
Yeah.
That's your job. You need to do this well. My biggest complaint about this film is that it does not have an ending.
Right. It's true.
And in fact, they jump over whatever series of stories they did. The ending is like, okay, she's going to do rollerball, and then she's near champion of the rollerball, and then that's it.
Yeah.
She pulls a Babe Ruth and points up. I'm coming. I'm going to get you.
Yeah.
And I don't have any problem with it leaving as a cliffhanger.
Sure.
If it's obvious that that's what they're going to have to do. But you don't skip whatever series of stories you just skipped and then cut.
Yeah.
That doesn't, as far as a storytelling perspective, that just doesn't make any sense. And, from my perspective, What I'm seeing is that you're literally just cutting out the last 30 minutes. I've already committed to 2.5. I can sit here for 30 more if you'll just finish this story.
Right.
Obviously not the case. And from what you've told me, there's a lot that happens after the point where they cut it off.
A whole lot. I mean, look, the rollerball stuff alone was a really important piece of the original manga. So there's a lot of huge things left out of there. I mean, especially some of the opponents she encounters that I think really change and grow her. So yeah, man, it's the rough cut like that. That's sort of jarring. I think considering the investment you have early on in this film, just contrasted to everything else is built up. So definitely a bit of a nick there.
Yeah. So I mean that it was disappointing, and I don't necessarily have an issue with going and seeing another part to this film. I just wish that they would have left it a lot better than what they did, because I really felt like they did the film a disservice cutting it off the way that they had. Right.
Just after building things so much. Taking a quick look at some of the liberties taken here, because that's where we're going. There were some characters that were kind of mashed, into one and had their lines as their stories at least as one piece. I'm looking specifically at the bar scene. The Hunter Warrior brawl leads into the target that's hunting Alita and Ito. That character was actually called Makaku, the original manga. He had a whole backstory to him and everything as well, and the way he was just sort of mashed another character, it worked. That was fine though. I think changes like that serve their purpose. And then even within that, you had a couple of lines that were literally almost line for line, and a couple of shots are almost shot for shot. I'm thinking of the part where her body's shattered and she's got one arm left. She perfectly balances herself on it. I mean, that is page for page from the manga for stuff like that. And I think there's a lot to be said about the fidelity there. So I'm with you on the ending. I think that's where stuff like that, where they miss. But I think where they gain with taking liberties and taking shortcuts like that is for some of these characters that they've mashed together or shortened up those narratives for what we need here. That works.
Can I just make a comment on something?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people have a big crush on Jennifer Connelly.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Very, very, very pretty. Very pretty.
Oh, she's beautiful. Yeah.
But seeing her brain in a jar with her eyes staring right at you, by the way,
disturbing, right?
That was very What else was in there? There was other jars. What else did they keep of her? That's all I caught.
Of course, I know spinal column somewhere. Hands, I think, were elsewhere. Yeah, because they use that for the prosthetics and stuff like that. Yeah.
So what the plan is? They're going to take that up to, what is it, Xena?
Salem.
Salem?
Yep.
I'll get it wrong every time. And so what? They'll make her into a robot?
Well, something that's established. Now this is early on. It's mentioned shortly. It's the doc says regularly those long pipelines. Basically, the scrapyard's purpose is basically to send resources up to Salem that they'll use. And part of the black market and stuff that runs there, spinal columns, eyes, and especially intact brains are worth a lot for a number of reasons. Especially with the whole spinal columns for movements, cyborgs and stuff like that, because they haven't been able to fully replicate that stuff yet. So they send that up as part of additional materials to use for cyborg creation and things like that. So as you notice, they keep the class system ridiculously in place. Like they said, look, if you were born below, you're not going up there. In fact, if you're going up there, you're going up there in pieces. That's the only way you're going to get to Salem. And that is a point that is reinforced in the manga as well. In the character Hugo as well. There's a whole arc with him and what happens to his family and his stuff, and the way they're hunted and his brother's killed, and he's harvested and stuff like that. And yeah, he gets there, but in pieces. So I don't know, it's crazy, it's terrible, but that's just part of this.
Okay, so let me ask you, her body and her mind. It's based on she was a teenager,
right?
Roughly. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not gonna get into that too much, but I mean, we're talking about Hugo and stuff, and I mean the whole thing with Hugo, and he's a human, and she's a robot. She's a robot with a brain.
Yeah.
The relationship that comes from that. I didn't have too much of a problem with it because
Sure.
I mean we're in such a fantasy world to begin with.
Sure.
But I thought it was a little weird. I think they do a good job trying to build it up as they do, and the plot points are on point. But
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, but you know what? Isn't she supposed to be a kid?
To be precise, she's a little. Here's where I view some of that. So she's, source-wise, I think a little over 220 years, but with her sort of childlike ways, a lot of that is due to at first her amnesia, like who she was beforehand. I mean, she was literally this trained weapon, like this, martial assassin. Effectively, I know I was showing you a few shots from the manga and stuff. Those shots I showed you beforehand were like that was the last mission she ran before all this stuff happened. A lot of that comes from sort of her being that blank slate, but the more she steps back into herself and the more she starts to remember and get closer to that person, I think the more you see her mature. Those instances kind of like grow back into that. So, with the whole child thing, I think it's important to note that for consistency's sake, she did not have that whole childlike character through all her development. Like when she was, working, for the as an agent, when she was the assassin, that was not her. Always, I've always attributed a lot of that to what she's doing now in the scrapyard.
Well, and again, I don't overall have a big issue with it. It's a little irky to me.
Oh, sure.
But overall, I think it works because watching the premise and the what this movie's trying to say. I mean, it is one giant metaphor for living as a teenage girl.
Right.
So I mean, that's not lost on me. But in fact, they do a really good job, I think, of matching that analogy.
For sure.
I think it's one of the more powerful parts of the film. But yeah, at the same time, it's like she's kind of a kid.
Yeah, right.
Kind of a kid, though. But whatever. Not a big deal. Of course, I had no problem with her slaughtering people. But but that's what I was doing when I was 13.
Right.
I was killing people in video games all the time. So whatever.
It plays to this part of Alita too, and you see this a lot towards the end of the last series that we saw, is this sort of like her wistfulness about finding some kind of escape to all this, the escapism. There's so many times where she'll come to this crossroad and kind of wish there was some way she could be freed from all of this. I mean, yeah, she's got insane powers, unbelievable like abilities, and like this ancient martial art and everything like that. But there's times where she's just like, I just want to find my friends and just leave this. I just don't want any part of this.
Just give me a kitty to pet.
See, exactly. That's her, and I think part of the pull about her as a character is how she's vacillated between those. She never stayed, in that kill mode, even when she, remembers everything about her past. When she fully steps into that, it's constantly been a story about her trying to reconcile with those things and still live as the current her. And she really comes to the conclusion, each day is what we make it, and we just have to keep pushing through that. So
there you go. So let's talk about the special effects overall.
Yeah.
You said the budget earlier was 170 million.
Yep.
We've seen a lot more spent on a lot less, I think.
We have.
This movie does not try to convince you that this is photorealistic.
Right.
But I think it does a good job of meshing everything to make it all work well together. I think it's every bit of its money well spent. It does a good job in this regard. Yeah. What do you think? I mean, did they again? I kind of asked this as far as a storytelling perspective, but did they bring your world to life, Ian?
I'm shocked to say this, Chris. They did, and I'm happy to say that too. I want to emphasize that. Look, I root for this stuff to succeed. It has such a bad track record that it usually doesn't, but this was such a pleasant surprise. I thought the CG was very well placed. I thought it was gorgeously done to really add and build a lot of the scenes, even some of the spots that you'd expect it to break more. I think the rollerball combat scenes and some of the others, it works here. And just to put further focus on it, there's a lot of instances, it's manga and anime alike, where a lot of these battles are at literally supersonic speeds. So I think to take that into the realm we have here, and then to use CG to communicate that. Does not come off as like corny or cheesy or whatever. There's so many times where I could be looking at a CG scene and be like, okay, here's another super, corny slow-mo. But it works. And I think it not only works if you're not familiar with it, but it works even more if you are, because I mean, some of these scenes, like for example, when her first body gets destroyed, I'm literally thinking back to, man, I remember reading that whole battle took place at literally like hypersonic speeds, and to like actually give us snapshots of that, I'm like, that makes sense for them using that pace. I get it, So I am so happy to say yes, they did.
Well, so let me even touch on that a little bit, because when I'm watching this thing, I mean, it's so much robot on robot, cyborg on cyborg action. I couldn't help but to think back to the Transformers movies.
Yeah.
And how much of a god-awful mess those are, and how most of the time you can't tell what's going on.
True.
And I think they intentionally took a lot of effort to make sure that wasn't the case here.
They did.
The action's really good, and yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a single realistic bit to it, but that's fine. Some people care about that. They want their action to be realistic. Could someone really do that? Obviously not here. But it was really good looking. It tells a good story. You don't get lost in it. Things that I think movies that are so CG heavy like this and so fantastical like this end up having those issues. Because of course here you're talking about Michael Bain. It's like, just make it bigger and kill stuff and blow things up. It's not the case here. The action was very well done. Very well done. They do a good job of showing you what you should be seeing.
Yeah. Which is a feat in this, because this again would have been very, very easy, I think, just to blur and just blow through. So as far as the choreography for how those scenes unfold, it's everything I think you should and come to expect. And to be honest, I was sort of surprised that they were still rolling with PG-13 for this, because I kept thinking, man, how can you do Alita with PG-13? Because there's going to be some crazy stuff happening. Cyborgs exploding and all kinds of other nutty stuff. But it worked. I think it worked.
It was noticeably devoid of blood, where there clearly should have been some.
Right.
And it's okay. I mean, I don't know if it's just because I come to expect it now, because I know this is going to be for a PG-13 audience. They want kids to go and see this.
Yeah.
They want teenagers to go and see this. This movie probably would not do very well at all if that wasn't the case. I mean,
right.
There's going to be plenty of kids who are going to want to see this. So, but yeah, that was a little noticeable. But I think I'm just kind of at this point a little programmed to be like, well, that's all right.
Sure.
Should have been there though. At least some. There should, excuse me. There should have been some.
Oh yeah.
I think the most we ever see is when she puts it on her face, right?
Definitely. Shortly after the dog's killed. Yeah. I was going to ask too, what characters really jumped out, or what character jumped out to you most. There's one I want to look at real quick that I was really interested in the rewrite they did for him. Hugo. Hugo as the love interest, which he was too in the original content. He was way more self-centered and had a sort of different arc happening. The original Sheeran wasn't a part of things. He was still running the streets for Vector. Still doing illegal activities. The cyborg harvesting and stuff like that to get his way up into Zalem, but he had a whole story about his family that was murdered, carrying on his brother's dream, trying to do that in his stead, and he really kind of just ignored Alita. She was just sort of there, accessory, and he finally realized after the point, like she actually really cares and actually really wants to help me. I thought at the very least, for the early issues you did have building up that story between them, at the very least he was delivered as more of a genuine character here. He was a lot more of a cad in the original, so it was a lot harder to believe that he just came around that fast. But the rewrite was fine. There's a lot of cases in other films I've seen where that falls apart. But I think the way they shortened that focus, we didn't have to go there with him and go through all of that, and we ended up here. So
yeah, Hugo was fine. I thought. I thought we kind of missed a little bit out on the fact that when his head does get put on a robot's body, we don't really see anything from this. Like, I mean, I would be freaking out. Even if I was living in this world in 2600s, or 26th century, I'd probably still freak out a bit.
Oh yeah, oh for sure.
But we don't have that moment at all. But if standout characters, Alita, she was
sure.
She drove this thing as well she should, and the people behind making Alita the best she could be, in my opinion, did a good job.
Yeah. No, they definitely did, man. I mean, as far as the freak out moment too, it's funny you mentioned that. Hugo sort of snapped. He sort of semi lost his sanity between the shock of the new body and his dream being shattered was enough to push him over the edge, the original, and he had some real mental stuff with that early on too. But no, this is a story that's definitely driven by Alita. I think it's been that all across the time this series has existed. I think it's important to note, Mr. Kishiro, who's driven this series, it's been nice to have a consistent hand with this series for as long as it's been around. Like, I can read the original stuff today, I can watch this, and then see where the manga ended, and see that same steady force through it. That's refreshing. You don't always get that. So this is definitely something I think that came from strong foundations. It's got almost too much to work with, but I think for this first outing, for this first place they've gone, cool.
So, what do you think? Can they tell the rest of the story in one more movie, or is this a trilogy?
I don't see this as anything less than a trilogy, man. And bear in mind, I'm completely ignoring the next series, Last Order. I'm just going to assume that's not going to be a part of it, because I literally think that's impossible to tell within a trilogy with where they stopped here. There's too much that happens. But plenty more to see. I mean, because you look at the first, I mean, you've got, golly, almost 7 times the amount of additional volumes of content to pull from just to go through. So it's...
Oh, hey, let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Hugo again.
Yeah.
So how does that play out in the comics where, I mean, because she had to cut his head off.
Right.
I mean, how did that play out for Hugo in the comics?
So the way that they played it there was, of course, since Sheeran wasn't a character, you'd be like, oh, what the heck? How did they get through that whole scene? What she had done was, again, it was a similar setup. You had someone trying to basically frame her and to try to get her either her license revoked or to get her killed in this situation. One way or another, either kill him or you go up against an army and you're screwed. As she's running with him, he gets mortally wounded, basically really hurt really bad, and he's dying as is. And we sort of off camera, it happens. She makes a plan on what to do, because she starts thinking about that. If only I could share at least part of my life with him. If there's a way I could keep him alive. And then it comes to her. She says, "This is a long shot, but..." And we get this shot of her, running what looks like a wrapped up head. And she's already done that work, but she's already kind of covered, the majority like the rest of the body. And she's already done that hookup of her life support systems, like to her heart, kind of linking, with him to basically keep his brain alive, at the very least. Her thought is, if I can at least keep that and, cauterize the rest, and there is a chance of at least getting him to a new body. So she does it, as it happens in a similar order. She can put the guy who tries to set all this up, he gets completely screwed over. And that things work out like that. But yeah, she did not have a surgeon's hand to help her out with that. She did all that herself. But a lot quicker, because it was like, all right, body gone.
Huh, okay, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Did she kind of hide it like she did in the movie where
she did?
Okay,
she did. That's why I thought that was really cool. Even the way there were a couple of angles there that were literally lifted off the pages that they used, and I was like, somebody had some TLC here. They cared.
Cool. All right.
I dig.
All right. What, are we going to rate it? Are we done?
I think so. I think we're rounding that bin, man. The only other thing I want to mention, I was sort of missing, that I didn't expect this to hear, but I don't have much to say about the soundtrack. It's
Oh yeah, it was all right.
It's what you'd expect, you'd expect for a film like this. But I think we're rounding that bend. Do you want to rate this out of cyborgs or?
Well, yeah. I mean, 1 out of 10. What prosthetics? Cyborg prosthetics? What do you do? What do you do? 1 out of 10 Hunter Warriors.
1 out of 10. I like that. I like that system. You first.
1 out of 10 Hunter Warriors. I'm going to give this an 8.
Solid.
Yeah, it's a solid 8. It's a good movie. I would recommend it, especially if you like post-apocalyptic or dystopian future, sci-fi, cyborgs. I mean, this hits a number of different areas for you. It's a lot of fun, but you got to go into it kind of brainless. From my perspective, unless you know the stuff like your expectation of story, just because of the ending, I mean, you have to not care or be pissed.
Right.
It's one or the other. It's one or the other. Or you have to know ahead of time that you're not going to get an end to this, because the story they tell really could have been concluded in 30 minutes.
It could have been.
And if you don't know any better, you're just kind of like, what, that's it?
Yeah. Exactly.
And I didn't know no better.
Right.
So I was kind of pissed about it. Things line up well enough. They do a lot better job than I was expecting in areas that I thought they just were going to kind of fail at.
Same.
So it's a good film. I give it an 8.
Solid, man. For a couple of reasons behind this, I definitely do. Even though knowing the rest of the series, I put that bias aside. I did dock a little bit for the ending. A little bit about the compression of Hugo stuff. More about the ending, stuff like that set with me. I am so thrilled. I gotta say how important this is. I haven't seen an adaptation be not just faithful, but do service like this since the days when I watched Guyver live action translation, when I saw Iria, Zehram, the Zehram translation. I'm giving this a 9 out of 10, man. This is something I immensely enjoyed, and it gets that, because I had set on 8.5 for this longest, but I said, this did it. Not since the 90s have I seen this happen, and I'm so happy to see somebody nail it for once. Now, again, making this drawn out, if you have a sequel and make this a trilogy, there's an uphill battle where I could easily see definitely panning down on some things here. But for what this did, for everything it was up against, just for the sheer volume of material and stuff like that, well done. Thank you.
There it is.
There you have it. So, hey, if you guys got out to see this one, what do you think? We definitely want to know. Hey, post down in the comment section below. The likes, the subs, all that stuff really helps us out a lot to keep doing what we like. Or if you just want to cyborg fight about it. I mean, I guess we can't cyborg fight, but yeah, hey.
You can cyborg fight with them.
Yeah, I can.
I'm not going to cyborg fight.
Yeah, you guys, if you guys step in here, I'm going to hit you with the Hertz of Hayon. So hopefully you know what that is.
Oh my god, you're such a nerd.
Yeah, anyway.
I have no idea what that is. I just want to call you a nerd for it.
Post on up. Would love to hear from you guys, but hey, that is going to do it for us and for our review. So would love to hear your impressions too. You've heard ours here. I hope to get a dialogue going with you. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening if you stayed with us to the end. Peace out. We'll catch you again. Hey people, thank you for tuning into this episode and taking a listen. If you like our content, if you like what you're listening to, there anything we go over, hey, please, we would not only love to hear more from you, but it's great if you could throw some support. You can subscribe right below. Also, you can toss us a line anytime. That's ksongmedia@gmail.com. Of course, you can tune in for our channel anytime for movie reviews, game reviews, a lot of random wacky stuff. Who knows what you'll hear. And of course, our episode each week where we're bringing the nerdiest things we can find, dig up, and maybe not find. Maybe the stuff that just drops in our laps. But anyway, hey, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. We hope to hear from you again later. Take care.